I'd like to start off by thanking the Bibliographical Society of America for having me here today, and thank you all for attending the New Scholars presentations at the annual meeting. I'd like to begin my presentation by introducing my larger dissertation project before utilizing bibliographical description to present new evidence concerning the text of Fasciculus Chemicus. My interest in bibliography lies at the intersection of the history of science and the history of the book. Understanding the influence of text on creating and spreading alchemical knowledge is imperative to the historical study of the scientific practice of alchemy. I'm specifically interested in the material additions to and interventions in 17th century chemical collections, including scribal and pictorial speculations in the margins of these texts, and, most pertinent to this talk, intentional hand-press printing alterations within a single edition. Today, the historical discourse surrounding the study of alchemy promotes a return not just to a literary analysis of texts, but to the materiality of text as integral to early modern experimental world. Bibliography is advancing this scholarship by exemplifying the ways in which the library and the laboratory are conjoined spaces. For my dissertation project, titled Chemical Collections, 17th Century Textual Transmutations in the Work of Arthur Dee, I broadly define the term chemical collections as an early modern genre of natural philosophical text. Scholars such as Didier Kahn and Carlos Gilli have worked to delineate the early predecessors of this alchemical bibliographical movement in the 15th and 16th centuries. My project concentrates on the 17th century as an apex of this genre, using Arthur Dee's Fasciculus Chemicus, first published in Latin in 1631, as a case study. I argue that the mid-17th century is a Baroque moment for chemical collections, in that the height of alchemical knowledge-making has been reached and necessitates a new stage of chemistry with a Y. Fasciculus Chemicus follows an early modern alchemical trend of carefully curating tracts by well-known Hermetic authors to create new alchemical knowledge. Dee meticulously cites his sources, spanning Pythagoras to Basil Valentine, down to the page number. By the time that Fasciculus Chemicus is translated into English by Elias Ashmole in 1650, a new trend has emerged of the encyclopedic alchemical compendia. This shift from using old knowledge to create new knowledge to organizing multi-volume compendia of entire alchemical tracts with indices and tables of contents, such as Lazarus Zetzner's Theatrum Chemicum and Elias Ashmole's Theatrum Chemicum Britannicum, parallels the canonization of chemistry in the realm of experimental science. Fasciculus Chemicus was created by alchemical adept Arthur Dee, the firstborn son of famed English alchemist, astrologer, mathematician, and maritime navigator John Dee. It's a small book, just 14 centimeters long, and is collated in the form of a duodecimo. It was first printed in 1631 in Latin in Paris by Nicolas de la Vigne. At the time of publication, Arthur Dee was working as court physician to Tsar Mikhail I, and Latin was not yet printed in Moscow. Arthur Dee authored a Latin manuscript titled Arca Arcanorum, with a preface dated 1634, which is strikingly similar to his printed text, Fasciculus Chemicus. The most marked deviations are 10 additional observanda at the end of the text in reference to him finally obtaining the prima materia, a white powder, likely antimony from Hungary, which he saw his father utilize in an alchemical experiment as a child. In the final stage of the 17th century production of Fasciculus Chemicus is Elias Ashmole's 1650 translation, English translation, printed in London by J. Fletcher. This edition of the text is full of self-promotional material for Ashmole, and it was much to Dee's chagrin that it was put into a vulgar tongue. Arthur Dee died 1 year later at the age of 72. Previous scholarship about the printed and scribal production of Fasciculus Chemicus falsely asserts that there are multiple Latin editions of the text. However, through bibliographical description, I've concluded that there are actually 3 variant states of a single Latin edition of the 1631 Fasciculus Chemicus, proving the importance of a material investigation of individual copies of a text. I've examined 10 of the 17 extant copies of the Latin Fasciculus Chemicus held by libraries. I plan to view the remaining 7 during a final research trip next year. 2 that I have not seen in person are available in the form of digital facsimile. For this presentation, I'd like to address and correct some of the errors created by the ghost editions of Fasciculus Chemicus that continue to haunt the scholarship on this text. Previous misconceptions are due to assumptions made from archival sources without explicitly examining the texts themselves. Thus, what follows is a case study on why bibliography matters to textual scholarship. The first state I will present is the 1631 Latin edition of Fasciculus Chemicus, which includes the Paris printer's information on the title page and a dedication to the students in chemistry. Although this is the extant state most frequently found in libraries today, I am purposefully not referring to it as an ideal copy. It is more pertinent to examine the various states of the 1631 Latin edition as serving specific social niches, and this one was intended for a general alchemical audience. It is also the version used by Elias Ashmole for his 1650 translation. I will present evidence as to why I think this represents the state produced for commercial distribution. This formula describes the 10 leaves of prefatory material, the duodecimo body of the text, which is signatures A through G, and 2 leaves of signature H. Leaves 1 through 6 are signed throughout, except 4 and 6 of the prefatory material, as well as the final leaf, H2, for a total of 96 leaves. It is important to note that the scope of this paper concentrates on printed states of this text. Scribal copies, as well as marginalia, add even more variation to the unique copies of Fasciculus Chemicus. The Paris state of the 1631 Latin edition is interesting because it has striking collation anomalies. Since my project emphasizes the materiality of text, as well as bibliographical description, I think it will be helpful to virtually flip through the paratext of this state of Fasciculus Chemicus. Let's begin by opening the book. This is the prefatory material, signature little a, which is only 10 leaves. It includes a dedication to the students of chemistry, an epistle to the candid reader, and a flattering letter of support from Thomas Rhodes. The body of the text, signatures A through G, follow the standard 12-leaf duodecimo style. And the final H signature is only 2 leaves. From this, I think it's fair to conclude that the 2 H signatures were printed on the same sheet as the 10 leaves of prefatory material and were cut and sewn behind the main text. I have recreated a possible little a H duodecimo layout based on a design put forward by Philip Gaskell in A New Introduction to Bibliography. The filled lines refer to where the bookbinder would have cut the leaves, and the dotted lines show where to fold them. I have identified 2 states of the Latin Fasciculus Chemicus other than the aforementioned general market state. To do a proper bibliographical description for this project, it must be both analytical as well as critical, by first describing the states with a formula and subsequently analyzing the evidence in its historical context. The main variations in formula for this state are the additional leaf before the prefatory material, described as pi, and that signature 4 of the prefatory material is signed for a total of 97 leaves. This state, which is lacking the 1631 Paris printer's information on the title page, is the 1629 Ghost edition. Previous scholars have confused the undated copies for a 1629 Moscow edition of the text. This assumption was made because at the end of the prefatory epistle to the candid reader, Arthur D. signs off, "From my study at Moscow, the calends of March, 1629. However, a similar prefatory dedication is present in copies from the Paris state, which include a misprint in the date, it's missing the number 1. An additional contradiction concerning the 1629 Ghost edition, which I mentioned earlier, is that Latin could not be printed in Moscow during that period, so the entire epistle should be disregarded as signifying a 1629 Moscow edition. While both the general market state and the undated state include the 1629 date in the letter, these letters are not the same. The Paris state's epistle to the candid reader begins on little a4 verso and continues to little a8 recto, while the undated state's epistle begins on little a5 recto and ends on little a8 verso. As you can see, the prefatory material that comprises the little a signature has been reset, while the H signature on this sheet, as well as the majority of the title page, is not. The reason for this is so that a special dedication to the Brothers of the Rosy Cross could be inserted in lieu of the general dedication to the students in chemistry. I I believe that the explicit dedication to the secret Rosicrucian Brotherhood is why the printer's information has been removed from the state of the text. Rosicrucianism, while celebrated as a pious organization in Germanic principalities, was illegal in France. The French government found its secrecy to be diabolical. Thus, it would have been unwise and indiscreet to include any information that could be traced back to a print shop or publisher, especially one in Paris. It's typical, especially in the first edition of a text, for the printer to begin setting the type with the first page of the main text of the book, beginning with the capital A signature and leaving the prefatory material for last. The reason for this is to allow the author up until the final printing stages of the text to make last-minute decisions about dedications, etc. Thus, it would have been possible to print varying prefatory material, one version for a general readership and one for a dedicated audience, creating two different states of a single edition of the text. There is also a handwritten dedication in this copy of the Rosicrucian estate of the Latin Fasciculus Chemicus from Arthur Dee to his friend John Winthrop Jr. As with the printed dedication to the Brothers of the Rosy Cross, this scribal dedication, which is a quote from Ovid's Ex Punto, necessitates obscurity and possibly points to the fact that John Winthrop Jr., a well-known alchemist, was also a Rosicrucianist. It's clear in this undated version of Fasciculus Chemicus that it was intended for a very special and specific audience of Dee's choosing, who would appreciate his Rosicrucianist leanings. Finally, it's necessary to address the pie in my description of this copy of the Rosicrucian estate. It represents an engraved title page present in 3 of the 5 extant undated states of Fasciculus Chemicus. It is strikingly similar to the handwritten and painted title page from Arthur Dee's manuscript, Arca Arcanorum. The engraver even went so far as to imitate Dee's hand. However, the likeness of these 2 title pages is problematized by the dates of the manuscript and the print publication, 1634 and 1631 respectively. While the engraved title page definitely falls outside of the collation pattern of all texts in which it appears, instead of inferring that it was added post-Arca Arcanorum manuscript production, I'm more convinced that there's a lost manuscript version of Fasciculus Chemicus, which both the 1631 printed text and the engraved title page were modeled after. The minor stylistic deviations in Dee's emblem support this assertion. If there is a lost manuscript version of Fasciculus Chemicus, it likely has the same alchemical emblem as the engraved version. There are 2 extant copies of the 3rd state of the Latin Fasciculus Chemicus. This is a reissued state, previously described as a 1644 Stettin edition, which was probably the intention of the publisher. In order to market the illusion of a new edition to an audience 13 years after the original publication, the printer would want to hide any trace of a reissue. This is executed in the form of a new title page, discarded prefatory material, markedly the 1629 Epistle to the Candid Reader, and in one case a reprinted H signature, and in the other reprinted prefatory material. This variant state is clearly meant to make an old text attractive to a new market by the bookseller, who possibly had at least 2 remainder copies of the 1631 Latin Fasciculus Chemicus lying around. There are important collation variations between the 2 extant copies. Therefore, I will describe both the Universidad Complutense Madrid copy and the Beinecke Library copy with separate formulas. In the copy of the Stettin state held by the Universidad Complutense Madrid, the printer reprinted the parts of the prefatory material which do not reference any dates during the same print run as the new title page, which is clear due to the reuse of these specific decorative printer stamps. The final 6 pages of the body of the text are missing from this copy, which would have contained the H signature typically printed on the same sheet as the prefatory material. This is shown in the collation formula, which ends with G11 instead of H2 and only has 87 leaves. In the copy of the Stettin state held by the Beinecke, the bookseller had to remove prefatory material with dates, you can see the glue, in order to claim it was a new edition. This copy also has a reprinted H signature at the end of the text in an attempted facsimile style, but the printer gives the reprint away by adding chem to the running title at the top of the last page and omitting the italic quote at the end, which an owner has compared to another copy of the text and added by hand. Otherwise, it's a good attempt at a facsimile reproduction. Another way in which the Stettin printer deviated from the original printed text was to sign the reprinted pages with Arabic numerals, while the signatures from the original 1631 print run are in Roman numerals. It's clear that in all copies of the Latin Fasciculus Chemicus, the body of the text, signatures A through H, are from the same typesetting with the exception of the reprinted H signature in Mellon Alchemical 91, which makes every Latin copy of Fasciculus Chemicus part of a single edition. The variation in the printed prefatory materials certainly demonstrates the intentionality and agency of printers, publishers, booksellers, and authors to create different states of a single edition for various intended markets and audiences, and emphasizes the importance of a material investigation of texts to the study of bibliography.